Throughout history, until relatively recent times, mother's milk was considered the natural and preferred way to feed human babies. When a mother died in childbirth or was too ill to breastfeed, a lactating family member or neighbor was sought out to be a wet nurse. The infant would nurse from her breasts until he or she was returned to the mother, if possible, or reached the age of weaning. In wealthier households, mothers sometimes chose not to nurse and would hire a wet nurse or use a servant. When anything other than human milk was fed to newborn infants, like other animal milk, pre-chewed or other soft foods, malnutrition, infectious diseases, and dehydration were common. For the general population, the use of other animals' milk became more widespread in the mid-1800s. Goats, horses, and donkeys were used, but cows were the most widely available. Toward the end of the 19th century, publications and advertisements about feeding alternatives began to be published. Mothers began trying early concoctions of baby formula and baby food and began supplementing infants with cow's milk. Pasteurization reduced the incidence of infectious diseases being transmitted through cow's milk. However, illnesses such as diarrhea, anemia, rickets, and scurvy were still problems. The first commercial forms of formula, which were made from cow's milk and other ingredients, were introduced in the late 1800s, but were too expensive for most people. By the early 1900s, physicians had become more involved with recommending and selling a variety of infant formulas. With the arrival of home refrigerators and cheap evaporated milk, homemade formulas became widely affordable and popular. Some research studies even claim to prove that the evaporated milk-based formulas were superior to human milk. Those old studies, however, would never pass the kind of scrutiny given to today's research. Commercial or factory-made formulas surpassed homemade formulas in the 1950s. They were heavily marketed to physicians. They became medically approved and thus began to undermine mothers' trust in their own ability to provide optimal nutrition for their babies. Feeding infants on a schedule, which is difficult with breastfeeding, also became popular. This post-World War II era was a time of enormous changes in society. The economy was still transitioning from mainly agricultural to mainly industrial. Many more women were leaving the home to go to work, so they welcomed the option of formula rather than breastfeeding. This was the era of women's lib, with women wanting more control and freedom. Infant formula was advertised and recommended as an equal alternative to mother's milk, and no one seemed to be speaking up for the advantages of mother's milk. By the 1970s, breastfeeding rates reached an all-time low, with only 1 in 4 infants receiving any human milk. Essentially, artificial infant feeding, a rare alternative to breastfeeding for as long as humans had existed, became normal over the course of the 1900s. With formula feeding becoming the new normal, many women lost confidence and interest in breastfeeding. Popular women's magazines made mothers further question their ability to breastfeed. Even physicians played a role in discouraging breastfeeding, especially since formula was easier to measure, schedule, and control. As a result, a number of commonly believed myths concerning breastfeeding began to manifest themselves. Still today, mothers often lack confidence in their ability to breastfeed. That lack of confidence can lead to any breastfeeding challenge being a reason to supplement or to abandon the effort, especially without the proper support. Many of these myths have since been debunked. Please note the following. A mother can provide breast milk in most cases, even if her baby is premature, even if her nipples are inverted, she has had a prior breast surgery, she smokes even though she should be encouraged to stop, she has had an episode of mastitis, she does not eat a healthy diet, or she is on a medication, depending on the medication. Starting in the early 1980s, organizations such as the United States Breastfeeding Committee, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the La Leche League, and others began sounding the alarm that turning away from breastfeeding was a mistake that would impact the health of our nation's children. Since the low point of the 1970s, our country's breastfeeding rates have been increasing again due to these public health efforts to re-educate communities about the benefits of breastfeeding. But there is still much work to be done. Aggressive and misleading infant formula advertising is still prevalent and problematic. While certainly acceptable for the baby who cannot breastfeed, even today's advanced and safer infant formulas are not equal to mother's milk. Words on the package, though, like closer than ever to breast milk, premium, complete nutrition, trusted by pediatricians, new and improved, and supports a healthy immune system, can make these products sound enticing and superior.